It's interesting listening to everybody here and kind of hearing what their path was and listening to the question of what was in the air. I really think it's more a question of what's in your blood. I came to Georgetown thinking I was going to be an economics major. It was the 80s and I was going to do really well in business. But the freshman orientation show sucked me into Fulton Hall, and I don't think I ever really left it. And I did not become an econ major. But I went on to spend so much time with so many wonderful people, and as Tony said, it was about the passion. There were econ majors and biology majors and English majors and everybody else there who were just sharing what they loved to do and bringing what talent they had to the party. And as Chris said, if you were interested in something and wanted to play, do it. You had the opportunity, and that was something really wonderful that Mask and Bauble certainly gave me. And when I think of Georgetown. But I seem to have followed that path well, I'm going to be an econ major, I'm going into business, and then I end up at Georgetown doing theater. I left Georgetown and I went into advertising, and I worked for many, many years in the corporate world doing business until about 10 years ago, when the theater pulled me back in. And I found myself on the national tour of the Broadway revival of The Music Man. And it was an amazing experience to be back in the theater. It was in my blood, and I've been very fortunate. I said, I'm just going to ride this wave as long as I can. And so for the last 10 years, I've been riding some very bumpy waves, sometimes wonderful waves, but having a life in not just theater, but performing. Because if you're going to make it in this business, you hopefully can take whatever jobs that are offered to you and are interesting. But I think it's in your blood, and you have to follow it somehow or another. And as Chris said, we did not have the good fortune of working with Dr. Murphy at Mask and Bauble, but my senior year, it was my first foray into directing. I directed Kismet. Chris was one of our stars. And Dr. Murphy was my advisor on that because I kind of finagled it into being something for credit. Two things at once. So I wrote some papers and kept some diaries and had meetings with my advisor. I would get some college credit here. And looking back on that production and the advice that I was given and the care that you took in overseeing what was happening, I have to say, looking back, it is one of the proudest achievements I have had. And I look back with such fondness on that experience and the things that I learned and accomplished. It may not have been the best production ever.
Yeah, it was.
But actually it was pretty good. It was big. It was really big. Tony was in it too. Not performing as well. But it just, the theater and the love of theater has brought me such happiness in my life, and the seeds all come to here. So.
Terrific. Joe?
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that the seeds do come back to here. I came to Georgetown, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, so I was an English major. And I got here, and shortly into it, I got very, very much hooked into the theater. Again, I guess I was the first generation of non-Donn B Mask and Bauble. It was under Dennis Moran, who was a great guy and a really inspiring director. But Donn taught all the theater classes I took here, and I have to say, once I decided that theater was going to be my career, and after I left Georgetown, I went to Carnegie Mellon, which is a terrific program, but the rigor and the detail and the scope of Donn's classes in theater history and style and all of those things, there is nothing like that at Carnegie Mellon. And that's a conservatory where you figure, well, you're going to be drilled and all that stuff. None of it. All that background I got from Donn. And Donn also put together a great faculty where you'd have Dennis Moran and Paul McCarran and from the English department, Gay Chima and Joan Homer and Ray Reno, who were just really inspiring people. And Donn, actually, while I was at Georgetown, he said, okay, I want us to have a theater major, a real theater major within the fine arts department. And I, by that point, had become a double major in English and fine arts. And somehow I wound up the first official theater major. I don't know if I was one of the only theater majors at Georgetown in its history. And what it really was you take classes here, and then you took consortium classes at American U and GW, anywhere else that had these courses. So I was able to study design and all these other things. And the great thing about that was that Donn, through everything, what was just said here by a number of people, the spirit was just try it, do it. I remember I did this thesis project for Donn, this kind of conceptual, expressionistic play about Wagner and leaving all these things in. And he was great. He said, just color outside the lines. Just go for it. Don't feel constrained by any conventions. And that was so liberating that ultimately, when I had the choice of what I could do for grad school and with my life, I said it's got to be theater, because there was that love instilled here, and that sense of a real community and a mutually supportive community with the faculty, with the other students here. So it was kind of inevitable. There's no way that English major had even a shot. And I want to say that it's really exciting to me. I still live in Georgetown. It's really exciting to me that this whole theater complex has developed. We, of course, had nothing like this. We were over in stage 3 in Bolton, and everyone remembers that. Great black box space, but this is spectacular. And I think it's ironic that this used to be the Riggs Bank building, where we get all our cash in the cash machine, and it's the last time I remember getting real money from a theater.
Jack?
Excuse me. I showed up at Georgetown with a love of the theater, because I grew up in New York, and I remember going to see The Miracle Worker, which was the first thing I ever saw with my grandmother, and way up in the back of the balcony, and I remember at the end of the show looking at my grandmother and saying, I don't know if I want to be blind, deaf, or nothing. Little did I know how close I'd get to all three. But so I came to Georgetown with the love of the theater. My parents would pay for Georgetown, my parents wouldn't pay for Columbia, which is the other place I went into. So I came here with it and was thrilled to find a person who would support my desire at that point. I was a child of the 60s for experimentation and trying new things. And actually this is where I started directing. So in time, and we were allowed, and we were at the same time, to combine what was happening, on the streets, and what we felt politically, and what was happening in the theater. We were allowed to combine those things and make plays or do plays that were, a combination of all parts of our lives. And I found how the theater was more than I even thought it could be by these days, and what happened during my days at Georgetown. So it was an ability to sort of combine my personal life and my professional life in such a unique way.
Great. I'll just throw in a thought. I've been thinking all week about what to say, and finally yesterday it struck me. And it seems to me that what Dr. Murphy did was all about belief and faith. For me, he had belief in individuals. In my case, he said, why don't you direct that big musical? There was no reason for him to do that. I'd never directed anything. I never said I wanted to direct anything. And I think the same thing happened when we started Midnight Theatre with John Reed, Dave Hammond, and he believed we could do things. And then he had faith that we would. And I find that to be just an extraordinary combination of belief in individuals and faith that a bunch of kids with no training, no professional experience, could actually, as people here have testified, create something that moved people. And I think that was certainly the case when I was here. And I will always be very grateful for having had a very rich and wonderful professional life as a result of stumbling into the basement of Poulton Hall during my freshman year when I was I was an English, I was a classics major. Yeah, then I became an English major. Yeah, because you didn't have to translate Latin every day. So, but I really think those are the things for me that summed up the as I made that Freudian slip about graduating from the Mask and Bauble, because that's really how I saw my time at this university. It was really true, because I was very fortunate to have a roommate who was a Phi Beta Kappa in his junior year, and I would take the same courses he did because he took really good notes. So he went to class. Frank Sylvester went to class for about a year. So.